Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 95. I'm your host, Joe Hannon, Joe from Jersey. No, it's been a minute. My wife and I had a baby, so I've been trying to figure out what life looks like operationally speaking. As a father of two, has not been much time for podcasting. And then prior to that was the run-up of getting the house ready for the baby. But things are in a good place right now. Things are moving steadily along. And I'm eager to be back talking to you all, since we don't get to talk much, unfortunately. It's 6:47 in the morning here in New Jersey. Sun's coming up. It's going to be another balmy 90-something degree day with 110% humidity, I'm sure. The swamps of Jersey, Springsteen still does, sing about. Anyway, I'm here. I'm back. Feels good to be back. This episode of BJJ Meditations is sponsored by Outlier Database. Outlier Database is the ultimate analytical tool for no-gi jiu-jitsu, you ultimate analytical tools. It's a tag searchable database that allows you to see how principles, concepts, and techniques are applied at the highest levels of grappling. I use Outlier Database as a supporting tool for any jiu-jitsu instructional, using the instructional for technical study and Outlier Database for understanding practical application. Sign up for Outlier Database today at outlierdb.com and use the promo code BJJMed to take 50% off your first month's membership. That's OUTLIERDB.com and promo code BJJMED. Link is also in our show notes. And thank you to Jake Luigi and Outlier Database for supporting the podcast. I was actually having a cool conversation with Jake yesterday. They've got some really fun stuff in the works. Super stoked about it. It's kind of like one of those situations where we're sort of waiting for the AI to improve, but once it does, man, they're sitting on some gold, I think. Yeah, for the YouTubers out there, I'm sorry for this weird camera angle. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work with my my standing desk, but you're just gonna have to deal. You're probably not looking at me anyway. You're probably looking at whatever you're pretending to work on right now, while your boss is looking over your shoulder. This week I wanted to talk a bit about something fun that's going on at Princeton BJJ right now, and that's we've introduced this Judo program. There's this lovely guy, John, who recently earned his black belt in Judo, and John has been a guest instructor numerous times in our school. He's super generous with his knowledge, and he wanted to start a Judo program inside of Princeton BJJ. And I mean, in my mind, there was the only answer to that question was yes. And we just kicked it off, and the results have been great early on. It's quickly becoming one of our most popular classes, which is kind of interesting because Judo as a sport is sort of struggling. You know, Jiu-Jitsu is kind of like the new kid on the block and everybody wants to do it. But of course, one of the bigger weaknesses of Jiu-Jitsu is that there just isn't really enough time in a 1-hour class or maybe even an hour and a half class to devote a ton of time to going deep on stand-up work. And I have nothing against guard pullers and pulling guard, like it's part of the game. But you know, knowing stand-up is hugely important, as I'm sure all of you would agree, listening to this podcast. And frankly, it's just a ton of fun. So it's been great to get this program off the ground with John, and I'm super excited to see where he takes it. So I really wanted to focus on what's going on there. And the way John has structured things, I think, is great. It's a choose your own adventure dynamic. You could choose to go through the program and accrue rank in Judo, or you could just kind of drop in and pick up knowledge here and there whenever you want. And that's totally fine. You don't have to wear a Judo gi, you don't have to put on a white belt, but the option is there for you to put on a white belt. And it's been really cool to see so many of our instructors and so many of our students who are brown belts, black belts, purple belts, put on the white belt and start over. and lean into this idea of don't know mind. Something that Josh says frequently, I forget where he gets this from. It might be some Confucian thing, but he says the mind stops with recognition. And I think that's the spirit of this idea of don't know mind from Zen Buddhism, where when you embrace the fact that you don't know, you can see things with openness. You can make new insights that weren't available to you before. And that's kind of how I'm experiencing judo right now. But that don't know mind, it takes some practice because it has these insidious, your ego has these insidious ways of thwarting that openness. And just as an owner, one of the owners of the school and an instructor, it's interesting to be in the room and to see who embraces this and who has some degree of resistance to it, and then to feel out why. I think everybody has their own texture to their patterns of resistance in this area. Some people, it's simply pure ego. You know, they've spent all this time accruing rank and they don't want to start over again. Then the other fear I've encountered in the program so far is this fear of looking stupid. People don't like looking foolish, but there's so much joy and freedom in looking foolish, and that's something I wrote about in the debut issue of Power Trip, with my short story "I Can't See You So Well From Here." That short story is a parable, so to speak, about the wisdom and foolishness and what happens when you embrace being a fool and let go of that fear and what is available to you if you move through it. So I'm seeing that. I'm also just seeing, frankly, some laziness. One of the more interesting excuses I heard was it takes a long time to get a black belt in judo and jiu-jitsu, so why would I do both? And which is kind of interesting because you could just show up and train judo to enhance your jiu-jitsu. You could just show up and train judo because it's fun. This idea of it taking too long is strange to me. Don't really know what to make of that one. There was another pattern of resistance that I wanted to bring up too that I forgot. So maybe it wasn't that interesting or important, but there was another pattern that I was noticing too. But either way, I've felt this secondary benefit of studying judo right now, and it's that it sort of like reignited my love for jiu-jitsu by seeing it from another vantage point. And it's not like I had fallen out of love in with jiu-jitsu, I should say. It's just that I think in any long-term relationship that's based on love, it evolves over time, it changes, and you go through these ups and downs. And I've been through this period, let's call it for the last like 4 months or so, where jiu-jitsu has felt like a job to me. You know, I have a school that I help run, I have classes that I teach, and I show up and I do my thing and I put my all into it. But the intrinsic joy has been there, but it's been less vibrant. And judo is making it more vibrant because I'm seeing how this mindset, this don't know mind, this curiosity is available to me whenever I want it to be. So, for example, guard retention is the subject matter of the month, and this new curiosity has really forced me to pressure test and reconsider everything I think I know about guard retention. And you know, is that conviction in those ideas around guard retention, is that earned or borrowed? You know, did I pressure test those things, or did I just take somebody else's word for it? Is it something that when pressed, am I going to default to it, or am I going to default to something else? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? If it's a bad thing, do I need to refine what I'm doing? It's been a great process. And it's all just coming from this looking from a different vantage point, like looking from jiu-jitsu over to judo. And the cool thing about judo so far has been we have these very technical sessions on Sunday mornings, and it involves a lot of repetition, which is kind of antithetical to the CLA eco philosophy of the moment, which again, like as I've said on the highest levels with Emily, I agree with to a large degree. I think it's a tool you can use with a great degree of specificity and success. And it's one I rely on often with the students, but it's certainly not the only tool in the kit. And Judo, I think, because likely it's a more traditional Japanese martial art, it relies on more traditional techniques. And, Uchikomi is a big part of that. So on Sundays, we'll do Uchikomi for like a half hour. And the objective is to get 100 repetitions in. So the past 2 Sundays, I've worked on 2 takedowns exclusively during Uchikomi. So this Sunday it was Ogoshi, and then the previous Sunday, what was it? It was one of the Harais, I think the headlock Harai. And it's been a long time since I've just gone that deep on a singular technique and felt its texture and felt just how much of a difference it makes when you pull a little bit more with your arm and get the proper arm motion and get the kazushi that you want, and that translates downstream to a more efficient and a more beautiful throw. So all awesome stuff there, but I'm also encountering this interesting dynamic where like I'm still in the minds of some of the students, like Joe the black belt, even though I'm wearing a white belt in the judo class, and they'll ask me questions, and it's hard not to slip into teacher mode. Some of that is just pure ego. There's this latent drive inside of everyone, I think, to not be foolish and to be an authority, because that's better than being a fool. And then some of it's noble too. Like I genuinely want to help people. Then they're asking me, my students are asking me questions, and I want to give them good information. But this problem happens when I start giving them information, and it's that the information I have is not so good. This is a dynamic Josh talks about in his work called Transference of Level, and it's this idea that you can take what you've learned from one art and bring it into another. And if you read The Art of Learning, he talks about how he brought what he learned from chess into Tai Chi push hands. And he did a similar thing, bringing Tai Chi and chess into Jiu-Jitsu later in life. But you can mess this up by doing it too soon, because he would say, you really want to learn the art in its own native language and locally before you bring in your own stuff. So you need to build up this baseline of familiarity with the art as it's currently constructed before you start deconstructing it. And that's tough with BJJ and Judo, because there's so much Judo in Jiu-Jitsu. And like, for example, I was doing Ogoshi with this white belt on Sunday, and that was his first technical session, and he saw me do it and he wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, well, this is how I was taught Ogoshi. Well, John, our instructor, saw me giving bad answers, essentially. Like, they weren't bad answers, they were technically sound, but I was actually teaching him a different takedown that was not Ogoshi. What I was showing him, the foot placement was different. For Ogoshi, you should be kind of straddling the inside hip for the throw. And for what I was showing him, my feet were planted firmly sort of between my partner's feet. So here I am calling this thing Ogoshi. It's not Ogoshi. It's something else. What I was doing, was serviceable. It took the person from standing to the ground, but it was not Ogoshi. So John came over and kind of like ironed us both out. And that was just such a rich learning moment for me. On this idea of like, don't be so hasty, man. Like, really lean into this notion of beginner's mind, really lean into the local nature of the art before you bring in any jujitsu stuff, and savor this. Like, I'm really seeing Judo right now as an opportunity to take all of the mistakes I made in jujitsu and do something constructive with them. So it's been beautiful, and I'm going to try really hard not to turn this podcast into jujitsu meditation or into judo meditations, but It's going to happen from time to time, just because it's very much like what's alive for me right now in my training. Yeah, so that's what I got for you this week. I'm going to try and get on a more regular cadence with the podcast. I'm thinking every other week, unless I'm feeling particularly inspired, but at least every other week, I'll try to have a new episode out for you guys. Really appreciate those who have stuck around and encouraged me put out another episode. I think part of also what I was feeling is this businessman-like attitude to Jiu-Jitsu is kind of like transferring over to BJJ Meditations. And I always wanted this podcast to be something where I felt inspired to share it, not obligated, because I think that you, the listeners, can tell the difference when it's not. And the last thing I want to do is bullshit you. I'm actually working on some writing right now about my operating principles for life. Like when my son Cormac was born, I wrote this series of essays called The Idea of You, about him and the kind of world we were bringing him into and the context I wanted to have him to have about the time when he was coming into being. And I really want to write something of similar potency for my second son, Ansel, but I wasn't sure what it is. And the more I think about it, the more it boils down to this idea of having an operating system, because we're moving into this world where paradigms are going to be shattered every single afternoon. That's largely in part driven by technological advances. So I think one of the best things anyone can do, and certainly that I would want my children to do, is develop their own sort of first principles based operating system. So I'm writing mine down for Ansel in essay form. So not so he can copy it wholesale, but so he can get the gist of what this is, how it works, and create his own. And I hope Cormac will do the same thing too. But like one of the very first principles, I think it actually is the first principle of my OS draft, is integrity over image. Do what's real and right over what feels fake, what is fake or feels good. Action. If I have to pretend, it's a no. So BJJ Meditations falls into that category of like, if I have to pretend, it's a no. The last thing I want to do is put something out into the universe here that lacks authenticity, that I wouldn't stand by otherwise. So yeah, hence here we are after some time away. But I'm back, and it feels good to be back, and I appreciate your support. Once again, thanks again to our sponsor, Outlier Database. You can use the promo code BJJMed to take 50% off your first month's membership. That's outlierDB.com and promo code BJJMed. Link is also in our show notes. Thanks again, folks, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks, most likely.